Hi, Jeff. You want to just tell me a bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born and raised in North Toronto in a suburb called Willowdale, where my sister Michelle and I lived in a house from 1961. I left my home when I was about 17 years old to live on my own and started to work as I couldn't afford to go to school at that point. And I left home. I got a job on my own and started working for my father at about 18. And basically it made me become much more independent being on my own. And I rented a basement apartment at the beginning, and then from there I moved probably about 3 times to different homes, apartments and basement apartments and shared townhouses with all kinds of different people. And it wasn't until I was around 22 that I started working in a drugstore that my father was the vice president of. It was a chain of about 42 stores in Ontario called Drug City Stores. And I started as a management trainee, worked my way up through the company as an assistant manager, a manager, a buyer, a store opener. And I guess it was when I was around 23, 24, I realized that I didn't really want to be in retail anymore and became a salesman for an import company. And that was really the best thing. I always tell people it was the best thing that I ever did because that really set me on my career path. In fact, that's what I'm still doing today, approximately 35 years later.
So maybe now you can just tell us about what exactly happened to you and with your accident.
Okay, so it was on November 20th, 2015. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was receiving a shipment from the United States. And a truck driver that normally brings me my merchandise from this one particular factory in Kansas knocked on my door and told me that he had two pallets of merchandise, 2 skids of merchandise. So I had a machine in my back that was able to take skids off trucks. It's called a pallet stacker, very similar to a forklift machine. And unfortunately, that day, the forks were already about 7 feet in the air because I had just boosted some skids up top in my warehouse. And when I went out the back door, I neglected to bring the forks down to the ground. I guess I was lazy and in a hurry that morning. So what happened was when I was backing the pallet stacker out of my warehouse, and the forks were 7 feet in the air, and I was going down a bit of an incline, or a decline rather, to go outside, the pallet stacker actually fell on top of me and crushed me and trapped me underneath it. It was 5,000 pounds approximately, so I couldn't move. Well, luckily the truck driver saw me in his rearview mirror, and he ran out, yelled for help. 2 people from my office came out, and the 3 of them actually lifted the machine off of me just enough to pull me out and to leave me laying on the ground. So I remember on that day, it was looking up in the air, it was a sunny day, it was a little bit cloudy. It was cool, but not too cold. I had a jacket on, a down-filled jacket on, so I was warm, but I was also in shock. And I didn't know at that point that my pelvis was broken, my femur was broken, parts of my back were broken, 10 ribs were broken, because what happened was when the machine came down on me, it actually took my head forward and put it between my ankles. So it actually, I knew 2 things when I was under the machine. I knew that I was going to be at a commission for a long time, but I knew I wasn't going to die. So they put me into the ambulance after they had stabilized me, and they took me to Sunnybrook Hospital. The trauma team grabbed me immediately right out of the ambulance and took me into the operating room. And one of the funny things I remember was I had that down-filled jacket on, full of feathers, so they don't bother to unzip things or unbutton your pants. They just cut things off of you.
Yeah.
And I remember the next day they came into my operating room and said, "Oh yeah, you were the guy that had that down-filled jacket." I said, "Yeah, why?" He says, "Well, there's feathers all over the operating room." So in any event, I never went into a bad place. I always knew that I was going to be okay. I just knew that I had to work hard, and I had some great support. My family was always there for me. I went into the accident in really good shape, so that made a difference. I worked out, 4 or 5 times a week for the last 12 years. I was very strong. It made a huge difference to my recovery being so quick, and I ended up unfortunately with my pelvis being broken in half. They had to stabilize it with 2 rods that went from one side to the other. And unfortunately, my femur was so badly crushed that they had to actually put a titanium rod from my knee right up to my hip. The ribs had to heal on their own because there's nothing you can do for that. My genitals unfortunately got crushed as well, but healed. My head was cracked at the top, so they had to put staples in my head here. And those were the injuries that I had sustained. But unfortunately I was in a wheelchair because I couldn't weight bear for 3 months. But I worked really hard even before I could get out of the wheelchair, with weights in my hands, sitting on a couch or on a chair every day. I never wanted to just stop until I could walk again, so I worked right through until I could walk, and then I had to learn how to walk again, which they helped me with at physiotherapy every other day, I think it was, at St. John's. Finally, when I could walk again, it was tough, but I knew in time that things would get easier and better, and I would get stronger. I lost a lot of muscle mass because not being on your feet for so long, your muscles tend to atrophy. But slowly but surely, I gained more strength, and then I had one more operation recently. It was only probably about 6 to 8 weeks ago. On my outer knee, there were 2 screws that were rubbing against tendons that was hindering me from being able to walk properly. But as soon as those screws came out, my mobility got better, my strength got better. It didn't bother me. I wasn't getting nerve pain because of the screws rubbing against the tendons and nerves. So now I'm in a much better position to be able to move forward and get stronger and work harder and heal.
So I'm just gonna ask you now how it felt from being this energetic and very in shape to being confined to this wheelchair.
So, that was one of the hardest things for me when I had mentioned earlier, being under the machine. I knew that 2 things, that I wasn't going to die, but that I was going to be at a commission for a long time. Being at a commission for a long time scares you when you're so used to working out every day or 5 times a week. And that was hard, but I knew that I was going to be okay. After I had a couple operations and the doctors were telling me that I had no permanent spinal cord damage, brain damage, etc. So I was okay. Like I said, I was always thinking forward, always positive. As soon as I could lift weights again in a wheelchair, I was doing that, and I never got myself, as I mentioned before, into a bad space. I was always thinking positive, and it was hard, not being able to walk and do things as I normally did, but I knew it was temporary, and I knew at some point I'd be doing what I was doing again, normally, and
Yeah.
I was always very positive.
So how did you accomplish this goal of going from where you were from what happened to you to back to your positive and
So that's real
working
simple
self?
because, like I said to you earlier, I didn't have any permanent injuries. The injuries I had could all be fixed, and I knew from the very beginning when I was diagnosed that all I had to do was work really hard. In fact, a friend of mine who had a very similar accident that unfortunately had spinal cord damage said something to me when I was in the hospital. We kept in touch through texting, but he said, "You know what, Jeff? Work really hard and rest next year." And I know that sounds crazy, but it just sort of reminded me that I can't take a break. If I feel like taking a break, I got to continue to work hard so that I can gain my strength, my mobility, and just
Yep.
get back to where I was before I had the accident.
So, what positive things would you say came out of this negative experience?
You know, that's a good question because I'm a firm believer that, you know, even in a tough situation like that, there's always good things that can come from them, from bad situations. And one of the good things is I tend to inspire people, whether it's at my gym or at public speaking where I've gone. I tell people my story. In fact, when I was in the hospital, I even had groups of people that got together in the hospital on the same floor as I was, and you know, we would just talk about one day all getting together and being able to stand together because we were all in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And you know, we'd remind ourselves how lucky we were and how fortunate we were. And one of the things that I had done, as you know, was I had a barbecue. I put together a barbecue for everybody that was on my floor at St. John's rehab. And unfortunately, one person came out of about four that I invited.
Yeah.
But he really appreciated the fact that I was, you know, I was able to get everybody to come together and to celebrate the fact that we were all
Alive
and walking and working towards, you know, being in better physical shape than we were obviously before we had at the time we had the accident. So, you know, one of the things I plan on doing more of is maybe inspirational speaking, because I just find that people really like to hear my story and the fact that, you know, I worked so hard to get through it, and I've always maintained a positive attitude. I never let myself go into a dark place, and I could have very easily done that. But I really want to inspire people that have been in similar situations, trauma situations, and I've done it before, and I know it helps people, so I want to continue to do it.
So finally, what advice could you give to someone that goes through like a similar trauma experience?
I don't normally like to give advice, but I will say what made it easier for me was knowing, number one, that I was going to be okay, I wasn't going to die, and that I was going to have to work really hard and for a long period of time to get my life back, because that was my driving force every day, was knowing that I wanted to be back to where I was before the accident, because I was in great physical shape and I was really I was able to do anything I wanted to. Climb mountains is one thing that I love to do, and in fact, that was one of my goals. I remember when I was just getting out of the wheelchair, was to be able to climb a mountain again. The Red Rock Mountains, actually, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I ended up going to Las Vegas, Nevada, probably about 3 months after I started to walk again, and I couldn't really climb the mountain I wanted to. I just wasn't strong enough yet, but it was still a goal I had, and I went after it. And in fact, I am going back to that particular part of Nevada next month in May, and I'm gonna conquer that mountain. So have goals, set the goals that are attainable, and don't ever take a rest. Just keep going and go hard, and just keep a good attitude.